Welcome to the Take Me to Europe podcast with your host, cultural anthropologist Monique Skidmore.
Today we're off to learn about a man who changed the course of world history. We'll be travelling to Vergina, the birthplace of Philip of Macedonia. We'll visit the tombs and the palace of Vagina, but we'll also be taking a trip to the underworld. And that's not something you get to do every day. When you think about tours in northern Greece, there's only one name that comes to mind, Anastasia Gietanou, a master tour guide who taught many of today's generation of Greek tour guides. We'll be talking to Anastasia about her fascination with Philip of Macedonia and her love of the antiquities of northern Greece. Well off the main tourist track, away from the Greek islands, Athens and the Peloponnese, are an astonishing number of well-preserved and picturesque historical and cultural sites. Northern Greece was once the mighty kingdom of Macedonia. Athens, Sparta, Thebes, Corinth, these were all great city-states of the pre-classical era. Macedonia was small potatoes compared to these cultural and military giants. But then came a man, the Argead King Philip II, who reigned from 359 BC to 336 BCE. It wasn't a long life. He was assassinated, having only reigned for 23 years. It's written that Philip II subdued mainland Greece, which is quite an achievement given his 23-year reign. Unsurprisingly, Philip II didn't manage to conquer all of Greece, but he did manage to father a child. And his son, Alexander the Great, picked up where his dad left off and finished the job. Philip II managed to reform the army. He created a brilliant battle technique known as the Macedonian phalanx, and he was given the title hegemon because he created a federation of Greek city-states called the League of Corinth. Before Philip II was assassinated, the League of Corinth was making plans to invade Persia. Macedonia was, for a little while then, the greatest empire in the world, and it led to a great flourishing and disseminating of Greek art, culture, and philosophy. And that's why Aristotle is so influential in Western culture. He was Alexander the Great's tutor, and his writings were therefore spread far and wide. Well, I hope I've piqued your interest in Philip II and the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, but I'm as interested in his death as I am in his life. So let's find out about him in the ancient Macedonian city of Vergina in northern Greece. Anastasia, you've told me that you believe Philip II changed the course of Western history. Can you tell me why you believe him to be such a significant historical figure?
First of all, I believe that if he didn't have Alexander the Great as his son, we would be talking about Philip the Great today. As you know, the son exceeded the father. Anyway, he prepared the way for Alexander the Great. So I think everything that our Western civilization owns to Alexander the Great today, he owns to his father, Philip II. I believe that he did not just simply change history, he created history. And a large part of our identity in the Western world today goes back to him.
So my understanding was that he was quite a powerful, conquering person, that he had military advances, that he spread Greek culture. Tell us about him.
He was born in a time in which, his kingdom was quite weak. At that point, he was the third son of the king. He was given as hostage to the reign of Thebes, Greece, not Thebes, Egypt. So that is to the north of Athens, just to get an idea of where that is. And he stayed about 10 years there. So he had the opportunity of encountering a different mentality and also one of the most important generals and politicians of his time. That's a difficult Greek name. He was Epaminondas of Thebes, and Thebes was the greatest power of that time. That time meaning middle of the 4th century BC, more or less, like 360 BC. Opportunity of seeing a city-state that was in a different way structured than what he knew so far. And he also saw a new weapon, because one of the main weapons that was used at that time was the spear. And a spear usually would be about 2.5 to 3 meters long. 3 meters is like something like 6.6 feet, more or less. And in Thebes, that spear was elongated to 4 meters. So when he returned to Macedonia, he introduced that new weapon, but he had the idea of elongating it even further than that, up to 6 meters. And 6 meters spear is very, very long.
It's like a javelin.
Actually, yes, it is. And first you can imagine that when the army was moving from one place to the other, it could not be carrying around a 6 meter long spear. So it consisted out of two parts, and you would slip the one into the other and go to battle. But anyway, it was not just the army, which was known as the phalanx, because that was an infantry formation, because that would mainly, say, keep the enemy at bay, but they would use also the cavalry and like in a kind of wedge formation. And it was just an army that was invincible practically till the Romans. And why I'm referring to that, because if you have a strong army and you have good ideas, you can achieve almost everything. And Philip had really the strongest and best army of his time. He also realized that if you want your army to move fast, and if you want trade and to pick up in your kingdom, because trade needs money as well, then you need good roads. And so he was the first one who really had very well constructed roads made. He also reorganized the economy, and he realized that if you want soldiers to fight well for you, you have to have happy soldiers, so pay them well. He tried to reconcile the city-states of Greece and unite the Greeks. Of course, with him as king, definitely. But let's say it was a first effort to do that and unite them all to march against Persia, something that he had started preparing, and he had sent his first troops to Asia already, but he never managed to complete because he was murdered.
So let's talk about his death, Anastasia. How did that happen?
Well, in a very theatrical way, we would say today. He was at the peak of his might. He was so mighty and strong that nobody really believed at that time that there could be an attempt against him, that he could die. That's why there was no tomb for him prepared. There was nothing. So he went to Epirus to one of his wives, because he got married many times. One of his wives, and maybe the most famous one, Olympias, the most famous because she was the mother of Alexander the Great. So she was a princess of Epirus. And Philip married many times also out of political reasons, to reconcile again and have allies and all of that. So anyway, he wanted to have his daughter, Cleopatra, and that's of course not the case. That's a different one. So he wanted Cleopatra to get married to the brother of Olympias. The prince of Epirus would become king. So it was again a political marriage. And the wedding would take place in the old capital of the Macedonian kingdom. The name of the old capital was Aegae. That is written Aigai. And people tend to pronounce it as Aigai or whatever, but it's Aegae. And we know from the descriptions that we have that they all gathered in the theater of the city. So they gathered there. And we know that 12 young men, unarmed, dressed in white, got into the theater holding 12 golden statues of the 12 gods of Mount Olympus. And his 13th followed Philip II. Again, dressed in white, unarmed, holding his own golden statue in his hands. And imagine a time with no social media, no internet, no television, no mass media, no nothing. How do you make a statement? And through entrances like that, he did really make an entrance, and stating practically that he was the 13th god on Mount Olympus. And suddenly out of the crowd, one of his former bodyguards jumped and stabbed him to death at the spot. He tried to run away. He was followed and he was killed on the spot as well. We still don't know, actually, who killed Philip II, and there are many theories about it, but we don't really know. And that was his end.
Well, after that dramatic moment, This week, we've travelled to Vergina. Can you tell us where Vergina is and what there is to see there?
Vergina, first of all, or Vergina, today's name of the village that was built there where the royal cemetery of the ancient capital of the Macedonian kingdom was. What we can see there today is four tombs that are in a building to which we many times refer to as a museum. Two of these four tombs that were found looted, but two were found unlooted. So we believe, because of what was found in those two unlooted tombs and the dating of the tombs, that the buried people there were most probably Philip II and his grandson and son of Alexander the Great, Alexander IV.
So if we go to Vagina, we will see this exhibition of the mausoleum. You know, anthropologists study death a lot. It's kind of weird, but if you want to find out what's important to people who are alive, we often study death rituals. And so I'd like to talk to you about tombs and the political aspects of tombs. Why were such tombs like the tomb of Philip II so important in the ancient world?
Tombs are important anyway, but because tombs are, first of all, the passage of the soul from this world to the underworld. In the ancient culture, this idea of life after death does not exist. This is the Christian perspective of it. In ancient times, the realm of Hades of Pluto, who's the brother of Zeus, and he's the king of the underworld, and he's very cute, actually. He's not like in Hollywood films. Not at all. Really very cute guy, really good looking. And he's very, very content with what he has because he chose to become the king of the underworld. And he's really the king of all those souls in the underworld. But the underworld is a cold, dark place of shadows. The souls are there as shadows. And also, depending on the era, there are variations in this cold world of shadows. Like, for example, there is Elysium, or the Elysian Fields, which is a place of sun where the souls of the absolutely worthy ones go, for example. But in general, it is a cold place of shadows. So the tomb is made for the one who dies. But you have a funeral, and you have items brought into the grave, and you have people coming to see that funeral. So the bigger the tomb, the more luxurious the construction, the more the items that you bring into the grave, and the more valuable the items you bring to the grave, and the more important is the deceased. But also, the more important is the family that is still alive and is still there. So it's practically, depending on the social status of the dead, it's a social and political statement. And in a case of a king who dies, of course, through the size of the tomb, you can make a statement. Through what you bring into the tomb, you make a statement. Like, for example, the tomb of Philip II was a revelation, was a sensation of the time. It was discovered in 1977, and we had never seen anything like that before. I mean, the amount of gold, the amount of silver that was found in there, and just the golden box that was used for his ashes and bones. I'm saying bones. It was a cremation, but the temperature of the fire was not that high as for the bones to melt. I mean, they did shrink, but they did not melt. So we have bones, which is very, very important, of course. But anyway, and I'm pointing that out because when Philip was murdered, as I mentioned before, nobody had expected that. So there was no tomb ready. There was nothing. And they built a tomb very quickly in 2 days because the body would start to decay. And whatever they brought into the tomb were things that already had existed in the past, already existed. And the box that was used, and that's why I'm calling it a box and not a larynx, because it was a box originally. It's made out of 24 carats of gold. It's 8.3 kilos and empty. It has an amazing work in it. It's cast, it has like details hammered. It's an amazing thing, just that. All we found, the archaeologists found the largest golden reef of ancient times so far, more than 700 grams, weighing almost a kilo on your head. Amazing. So all of that definitely made a statement. And of course, you cannot expect all delegates from everywhere in the known Greek known world back then to be in the capital in time to see the funeral. So many of them would arrive after the funeral. So what would they see? The facade of the tomb. So the only thing that could make a statement and deliver a message to them would be the facade of the tomb, apart, of course, from the palace, the family, and all of that. So the facade of these tombs, and these tombs in particular are called the Macedonian tombs. So they would see that facade, which would resemble the facade of a temple, because the soul of the deceased was the soul of a hero. So the last residence of the soul of the hero had to look like a temple. So they would see that. They would see the ornaments and the facade, the colors. This particular tomb of Philip has a frieze of a lion hunt. And what is very, very important is, well, lions did exist in Greece, at least till the 3rd century BC, and it was the royal hunt. But what is very interesting in that depiction is that you do see the deceased coming from the right, ready to kill the lion. Most probably he will. But in the center of that depiction, and in his whole glory, coming from the left, wearing light pink garment, most probably dyed in purple, and holding this long spear in his hand, is a very young man with long hair. There was only one with long hair, because that was really very, very radical at that time. That was Alexander the Great. So most probably it's him in the center delivering that message. Yes, my father is dead. He isn't here. He was very, very important. I owe everything to him. But now it's me on the throne. And I'm going to continue his work. So be careful, I'm coming. And I'm paying for everything.
So much amazing social and political propaganda around tombs. The other thing I'm really interested about, Anastasia, is what you were talking about. You said that it's a threshold, that this tomb is an entrance to the underworld, a threshold between the world of the living and the world of the dead. And I understand there's quite a complex and rich Greek mythology about this. You didn't just die and end up in the underworld. Quite a few things had to work together. What had to happen?
That is also true. First of all, there were many rituals that had to be followed. So after you die, they would wash your body, of course. They would prepare a funerary bed. You would lie in your funerary bed for a day or two because they wanted to make sure that you're dead. Because there have been cases where people just got up after a day again.
And what's happening to your soul if you are dead then?
Well, your soul has to go into the underworld. But in order for your soul to go there, you have to get buried. So your family needs to take care of that. So after then lying on your funerary bed, you get carried on that bed to your grave. And there will be either a burial or a cremation. And then everything would be covered with earth. The bigger the tomb, of course, the bigger the earth mound that would be made, like a small hill. And if it is a small hill, usually we call it a tumulus. Then there would be sacrifices for the soul of the dead. And after that, the soul would be able to go to the other. You would also have to make sure that the dead would have a coin with him, because one of the 12 gods would come. It would be Hermes, the messenger of the gods. So he would come and he would take your soul and bring it to the underworld. But in front of the underworld was a lake, and there was a ferryman. And the ferryman's name was Charon, or Charon in Greek, written with CH. And he would get your soul across to the gates of the underworld. But you had to pay him to do that. So if your relatives had not put a coin into the grave, then you could not pay Charon. So your soul could not get to the underworld, which was really bad, really bad. And then the other thing you had to do, you had to make sure that you were not really a great sinner. Like we have stories, many of them are in ancient tragedies, of how people like sinners, like murdering a bunch of people. Their soul could not enter the underworld afterwards and remain as a shadow in this world and hunted down by the Furies.
It's such a rich mythology, isn't it, of the underworld?
It is, because there's questions, is there an afterlife? What happens afterwards? Who's responsible for the time and the way of death? What happens after that?
Thank you. That was fascinating, Anastasia. So today we've travelled through time to meet a man who changed the course of the history of the world. And in doing so, we visit his very elaborate tomb at the exhibition at Vergina. Along the way, we've learned why the tomb decorations were such a big deal. We've also learned about the complex chain of events required to arrive safely in the underworld and the rich Greek mythology surrounding the afterlife. I'd like to thank the delightful master tour guide, Anastasia Gietanou.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Take Me to Europe podcast. Hop onto our website, takemetoeuropetours.com, and sign up to our newsletter to learn more about Europe's hidden and most exciting destinations. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast series.